Well, there's been little or no reaction, as far as we know, so far from African leaders to Mr. Johnson's decision to leave office. But a few African commentators have been having their say. Just before it was announced that Boris Johnson would resign, Nigerian author Aisha Osori tweeted, "Nice how Boris Johnson is showing the world that a sit-tight entitlement mentality is not unique to any people or region. Hang in there, Boris." While Zimbabwean journalist Hopewell Chinono says Mr. Johnson's decision to continue as interim prime minister till a new leader is picked probably in the autumn is straight out of former Zimbabwe President Robert Mugabe's playbook. Well, I'm glad to say that Hopewell joins us now from the Zimbabwean capital, Harare. Hopewell, first of all, what's your reaction to this whole political saga in the UK?
Good evening, and thank you for having me, Peter. Well, it started last night, and it provided some kind of comic entertainment, especially for those of us in Africa. We are used to Western leaders telling African leaders how to behave, and here was a Western leader who was getting resignation after resignation from his ministers and was hanging in there, refusing to go. But more importantly, what it did was it showed also that British institutions work. If this was happening in a country like Zimbabwe or any other African country where we have seen a lot of problems through dictatorships, perhaps some of the ministers would have been in prison tonight, and some would have been killed, who knows. So it shows the importance of institutions. On the Zimbabwean aspect, it was a good day to bury bad news, because the president of Zimbabwe appointed his deputy president's daughter into the Electoral Commission, which is going to supervise next year's elections. Zimbabweans were busy glued to the British story, to the Boris Johnson story, and this is what was happening back home.
Okay, I hope African leaders have been quiet about this. I mean, many of them are with Boris Johnson at Chogam a few days ago. What do you think will be going through their minds, and what do you think this resignation what effect will it have on that migrants deal between the UK and Rwanda, for example?
Well, I think how the Boris Johnson story played out was a very uncomfortable phenomenon for African leaders, because perhaps they would have liked a situation where he was allowed to stay in power as he wants to do for a little more time. I called it straight out of Mugabe's playbook, because that's exactly what happened in Zimbabwe in 2017. President Mugabe was deposed through a military coup, unlike in Britain where people were just resigning, ministers were resigning. He asked his party to allow him to stay on until the party's Congress, which is the equivalent of a British conference, where a leader will be elected. But in the Zimbabwean scenario, it didn't work out. He was removed. In terms of the Rwanda deal, one would think that perhaps it was a cabinet decision. It was a collective decision, not a Boris Johnson decision. And I would like to think that the Rwanda deal is meant to appease the British citizenry, because it's focusing on immigrants that are coming in illegally. So if you look at what Brexit was all about, it fits in well into the Brexit narrative.
Hopewell Chinono, Zimbabwean journalist, they're live from Harare. Always great to get your insight into these stories. Thank you very much for joining.